In Swineversation with Christine Mccracken, Senior Animal Protein Analyst at Rabobank. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, good to be with you.
We're here kind of recapping. You guys had the Pork Quarterly Q3 release last week, and some of the highlights was ASF, inflation and policies challenge growth while trade prospects rise. Can you summarize this report focused on the US market?
Sure. I think when you look at the U.S. market and what we're really focused on going forward is really the cost outlook, and considering what kind of what factors might drive profitability through the balance of the year. Obviously, the feed cost situation remains relatively volatile, but also looking at the health situation right now in the herd, and how that might affect overall production costs and labor. And those factors are all kind of covered in the report, but really also looking at the demand side. And that's not only here in the US where things continue to be pretty good, but also into exports. So really looking and taking a global look at the pork market, and to try to estimate what that might look like in the coming months.
So we got a few key rapid fire questions to get to. What is the biggest opportunity ahead?
Well, I really think, given how strong demand has been for U.S. pork, and how willing consumers have been to really step up purchases, I still think there's an opportunity to continue to grow pork demand here in our U.S. market. I think if you look across the solution set, beef prices are going to stay high. We've got shrinking supplies of cattle, obviously, and that's going to mean a lot less competing protein. And at the same time, a lot of consumers moving back to retail. And as we know, pork does better at retail. So I think there's a pretty good opportunity as I look out, to maybe grow domestic demand a little. And at the same time, I think, maybe get our arms around this health situation.
Biggest challenge?
The health situation. I think, it's been an ongoing issue for the industry, as has, the ongoing kind of productivity challenges there. And I think that's something that we have some control over. There's a lot of things we don't have as much control over, like, trade or currency that are a little harder to manage through. But what we can control is our own kind of biosecurity and labor and best practices. Those are things that as an industry we need to continue to improve on, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to limit some of those challenges.
Do you have an example of a geopolitical issue?
Oh, no shortage of geopolitical issues today. I think if you look at Pelosi's arrival in Taiwan, and some of the tensions that creates in China. Right now, there's as we highlight in the report, some opportunity to grow exports to China, given some of the rebound in demand that they're seeing there. Given maybe some of those tensions, don't think we're going to get a lot of that business. But, as I look out, just the tensions between some of these countries, and how that may impede trade are some of the big issues that we're watching.
So in North America, the demand is stable but weakens as the economy shows. Are there key indicators as they relate to pork?
Yeah, I'm still looking at the trade with Mexico. It's been such a strong market for the U.S. They've had their own production issues down there, and at the same time have been able to keep demand fairly steady. I think, I'd hope that we can hold on to some of that demand even into the next year. But, as we all know, it's a weaker economic situation that could present some challenges. So looking at that in the U.S. market really as the strongholds for U.S. pork sales.
So the US sow herd is below numbers from a year ago, I think 0.8%. Is part of the herd reduction and health challenges which take a toll?
Yeah, it's been that and some of the corrections that we've taken to maybe clean up some of those health issues. I think getting production right sized in some areas. We've seen some operations shut down most recently with some plant closures. So we are kind of right sizing production. The question now becomes, will we expand as things improve? And I think we're really kind of nearing that inflection point. I see some opportunity for growth ahead, but boy, it's still, there's a lot of risk out there. So I'd caution producers to limit the speed at which they rebuild.
How's the global market affecting the US?
Well, I think, if you look around the world, we're still a low cost producer of pork, and there is relatively strong demand for protein. So I think we're well positioned from that perspective. The real challenge, I think, as I look around the world is some of the geopolitical tensions we talked about earlier, and then the currencies. Right now the dollar being so strong, it kind of limits maybe our competitiveness relative to Spain, relative to Brazil. But at the same time, Spain's going through their own challenges. I've seen lately, obviously, they've been growing, but there's quite a bit of concern relative to feed costs and drought there, and some health issues. So, I think globally, we still have an opportunity to take share and grow our market exposure. I think Latin America has been a strong market for us if we think closer into home, but we're going to face some challenges when it comes to some of those Asian markets, for example.
How do we continue to be proactive, thinking 3 steps ahead?
Boy, that's a good one. We have to think like our consumers think, and really produce to their needs. I think being low cost is certainly one of those kind of levers we can pull. I also think we need to make sure that we're producing pork that they want to consume, making sure it's in the right form. But I think that as an industry, a big part of that is going to be just sticking with what we do best, which is producing high quality, low cost pork. And that takes a lot of work, as we know, day to day.
Do you have an update on the Canadian market?
Boy, that's a tough one. There's a lot going on in Canada with some plant closures up there, and a lot of production kind of out of alignment, the quota being put in place. I don't claim to know everything about Canada, but what I do know is that industry continues to face a lot of challenges when we think through where maybe some of that production lies, and whether or not it's well positioned. They've been moving a lot of hogs pretty extreme distances. I don't think that's a sustainable model. So I think there's still kind of sorting that out. I do think it's a good sign that they've just had 3 new plants approved for China. That might help on the export front, but boy, it's a tough one up there as they continue to kind of align production and packing.
What about the global markets in general?
Yeah, when I think through kind of where production is, it's hard to find a lot of areas where we're knocking it out of the park. Europe is really pressured with a lot of the regulatory constraints that they're facing. We've all seen the Dutch protests on the news, but really it's a bigger picture issue that they're trying to downsize their animal production. That creates opportunities for the US, but boy, that's tough for them. Belgium and Germany are putting similar regulations in place, so not seeing a lot of growth out of Europe. Asia, as I mentioned, continues to battle a lot of the disease challenges, especially in Southeast Asia. And they're facing higher costs just like we are. So it's tough for them to make a lot of money in this environment. So not really seeing significant growth there either. The one place where we are seeing a little bit of incremental growth is maybe Brazil. That's been an area that has kind of slowed down here in the last year. But as I look ahead, that's probably one of the better regions for growth. And I see some companies moving to expand production there.
So do you think inflation will shrink and stabilize and then recontinue at slow growth, or how do you see that shaping out?
Inflation economically, or
Yeah.
yeah, boy, that's a loaded question because I don't claim to be smarter than the Fed, but I do think that if you look on a year-over-year basis, it'll slow. I mean, I think you can probably make that case only because of where we were in the year ago period. But it's going to stay high. I mean, prices are still going to be above kind of historic levels. That's going to pressure consumers, especially at the lower end of that value chain. And I think that's going to be the challenge that we need to work around.
So do you see a demand on the horizon over the next 3 to 5 years beyond inflation? So, for example, expanding operations or new business ventures?
Well, there's always ways to expand, right? I think when I look at kind of some of the opportunities for the industry to create value, I think about maybe, some ways that we can raise that top line. It's tough in this environment. You're talking about a highly inflationary, weaker economic period for the U.S. consumer. So maybe not an ideal time to launch into new products. But when I think about, the groundwork, a lot of that legwork that needs to happen to grow kind of higher value sales, that's an area that I think we can be doing that work now so that we're ready and set when the consumer comes back.
How can you help producers at Rabobank?
Well, I think part of our job at Rabobank is to make sure that they have the financial resources to take advantage of some of these opportunities, whether that's, to expand production or to make investments to make sure that you have kind of the necessary kind of economic and environmental kind of hurdles cleared so that you can move your operation forward. Some of that is planning with your advisor, but some of it too is on risk management in areas that as a global bank we're able to help the industry move on. And I do think that my job as an analyst with our Rabo research group is to make sure the industry stays informed of what is happening around the world and in some of these markets. So that's really our goal, is just to help the industry kind of move forward.
Is there a quick summary or any highlights of other protein markets like dairy, poultry, and beef?
Well, I specifically deal with the poultry industry, and that's kind of the other half of my job. That's an area that's been a challenge all year because of high path avian influenza, helping our ham prices a little there as Mexico really can't get a lot of the turkey that they're dealing with there. But if you think bigger picture, chicken is also a relatively inexpensive protein, and I think a good option for consumers. A lot of food service chains coming back to chicken and as a good low cost protein, again reflecting a lot of that short supply we're going to have on the beef side. So I think that chicken is another one that is going to be growing into export markets, has a little bit more runway maybe there because of some of the lack of religious restraints or constraints that pork faces. But generally, still not looking at significant growth. Again, the same issues: labor in plants and on farm, high cost feed, high cost building, and some productivity issues that continue to be a problem for the industry. So not seeing a lot of growth, just more of the same.
So, for back to pork for a second, could better tasting pork be an answer?
Well, I sure think so. I like pork every day as it stands today, but I always think there's room for improvement, right? If you're not moving forward, you're standing still. And I do think that as an industry, we need to think about new ways to create value, and some of that might be by changing it up and looking at better quality or more consistent quality as a way to create value for the industry.
We'll finish up with your final synopsis.
Oh, well, I think I'm optimistic that the industry is going to have a great year. I think both in production and on packing. I do think that assuming feed costs remain relatively stable, that we can have a really solid production year and with limited growth. I do think longer term, the opportunity is for the industry to keep taking advantage of ways to really differentiate U.S. pork and think about how can we create value for the packer, the producer, and really everyone in between. That's our goal at Rabobank, and I hope that the industry keeps looking for new ways to do that.
Really appreciate you jumping on and giving us an update, Christine.
No problem. Good to be with you.
That's Christine Mccracken, Senior Animal Protein Analyst with Rabobank.